Welcome back, folks, to the Identity Jedi Show. We have the show. This is the episode that has been building for months. There's been a nice little rivalry brewing in the identity podcasting space. And Samir said, "You know what? Let's put all strife to bed, right? We're all in the same industry. We're all having a good time. Let's just bring everybody on. This is the episode." But before we get to that, and I tell you who the special guests are, Samir, we got to check in, man. How you been?
I've been good. Did I miss the last podcast? Oh yeah, I think I did. So yeah, you haven't seen me in a while. So I'm doing good. I'm wearing, for the first time on this show, my Balkanite swag. We finally released some swag. How am I doing? I'm excited. It's conference season is starting up. Let's just say that. I heard you talk about conferences. I've been talking about conferences. So I hope we get to see some of our viewers and listeners in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, RSA is coming up. I won't be there, so I will not be at RSA. But Samir, are you heading out there?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're listening, you're watching, you're going to be at RSA. You see Samir, hit him up, say hello, let him know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, whatever. Just say hello. But we'll both be at Identiverse, and so that's going to be huge in Vegas. So definitely come see us if you see there. Come grab a selfie. I'm working right now to figure out. I want to do some kind of informal thing, right? So I know everybody's booking up spaces, but I think maybe like that first day or second day, finally grab a bar somewhere. We'll do like an informal kind of meet and greet. We'll all kind of hang out. So there you go. Announcing that live to you. So if you're coming to Identiverse, hit us up. identityjedi@gmail.com. You can email us. Let us know if you're interested in attending. We'll start to do something very, very informal, just kind of loose, trying to get some people together. It's a good time. So with that said, here we go. Man, I wish I still had my setup because I would do a drum roll. We have two very special guests this week on the Identity Jedi Show podcast. They are the host of the Identity at the Center podcast. It's got to be the number one identity podcast. They've been doing it for years now. Please welcome Jeff Stedman and Jim McDonald to the Identity Jedi Show. We did it.
We did it. Thank you for that warm up.
Made it happen.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We made it happen.
You made me feel old when you say like the OG of like podcasting. I'm like, not that old. Come on.
The iced tea and the ice cube. I like that.
Well, that's what you see. So Samir just said it. So I've been wondering, I hear OG for forever, right? And that brings me back to Original Gangster from Ice-T. And I'm wondering, is that everyone's reference point or is that just me?
I mean, it's my reference point, but
yeah.
We'll just call it right here. It is the reference point. Otherwise, you're wrong if you're using it.
There you go. All right, I'm good with that.
There you go. All right, so
David,
guys, listen.
Samir, thanks for having us on.
Oh man, thanks for being on here. Like we talk about all the time, like just looking at the podcast space, right? So I always kind of say Identity Jedi Show, it's the fastest growing podcast out there, right? It's, to be honest, it's kind of slim pickings. There's not a lot out there, but so it's nice to just kind of have this group session and talk about this niche market that we love. I just realized I don't have my sign on, so I'll turn on the bat signal back here.
The branding, we all know about that.
There we go.
Branding.
All right, bat signal is on. So I very interested to kind of just get into it and talk about how you guys started Identity at the Center, right? Since we talked about the bat signal, let us know the origin story. Where does it all begin?
I'll start first. Yeah. This back in June of 2019, so about a little over 4 years ago, almost 5 years. What we were doing. You could argue we still don't know what we're doing, but we're still making it work. It was literally just Jim and I talking. It's like, hey, you know what? We should start a podcast. And so we started about 4.5 years ago, and 276 episodes just went live this morning with that. We do it every week, and we had no idea what we were doing when we first started. I think Jim and I are surprised that it's grown as much as it has. It's worldwide, tens of thousands of listeners. It's super nuts, and we only do audio so far. So we're going to start to branch out into video here pretty soon. But yeah, it's been a fun ride, and we're still figuring it out every day, something new. And yeah, Jim, I don't know if I missed anything for that, but I feel like it's the age-old story. We didn't know what we were doing. We just did it.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you talked about was what it was like in the beginning, and it was like everything that's happened over the 5 years that has made me laugh. It's like, people think that, oh, Jim and Jeff are just alike, and it's like we couldn't be any more different. We're really great friends, but we are so different. I think, Jeff, you're like David in terms of the podcast. I'm more like Samir, kind of you're the Joe Buck and I'm the color commentary.
No, I hate that. I hate that so much. Never Joe Buck. Anybody except him.
Right. You're the Joe Buck. I'm the John Smoltz. We'll just have to go with that for this episode. But yeah, we've gotten to experience a lot of things that, if you hadn't just come up with that idea of like, let's make a podcast. Okay. And literally, I think our first episode for like the first month had like 20 downloads. And now it's probably the most popular episode just because it's been downloadable for 5 years. But I remember in that very beginning just wondering like, okay, you had 20 downloads. You knew who the 20 people were who listened.
Yeah, we were probably 10 or 15 of them.
Yeah, we were probably 10 or 15, re-listening. But somehow we've kept it going for 5 years, and we drop an episode every Monday at least. We started doing sponsor spotlight episodes this year where we drop those like Wednesday or Thursday, and we only do those like once a month. We don't want to oversaturate it, but I think that's the real key is the consistency. Folks want to know that they're going to have some content to enjoy whenever they like to enjoy, whether it's the drive to work or when they're mowing the lawn or whatever.
And we'd be doing it regardless.
Who does that anymore?
Driving to work, yeah, it's like flying to work is probably more like it, at least for me anyway. But truth is, we would be doing it regardless. I think no matter how many people end up listening, we find it fun, and we'll do it until it's not fun anymore. And I've been very fortunate that the companies that we've worked with over that almost 5 years have been very supportive of what we do, and let us breathe and let us do our thing and not try to like take it over.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the other things I'd say, David, I think you're kidding around in terms of like a rivalry. To me, there is no rivalry. It's all about like I cheer you guys on all the time. I want you to be successful. I want this industry to be more connected. I mean, look how connected we are. We see each other. It's we dap each other up or whatever. To me, that's what it's all about. And the same with all the other podcasts in the space. I want to see them be successful. I don't think by more of us, you being successful takes away from our success in any way. Yeah. Vice versa.
No, not at all. Yeah, it is. It's me joking, right? But and that is, I mean, you're absolutely right about that, right? So I was getting ready to say, so Jeff, like me and Jim been on a party bus together, like we've had dinner together. So I'm just waiting to hang out with Jeff. And I'm just like, this is great.
It's not that exciting. I'll tell you that right now. It's usually me like in a room editing because Jim has like stacked so many different shows into one thing. I'm trying to get them out. Like,
yeah, Jeff's back in his room eating fried chicken and working on episodes. I'm on the party bus with David, and we're listening to like some LL Cool J or something.
That's funny. I was gonna ask. So it's really interesting, Jim. You mentioned when you first did this, 20 people downloaded it, right? The first, or Jeff, was that you? I just losing track of the conversation. But what's really interesting to me about what you've done and what we're doing here is, when I think about when I was a CISO, detection engineers had their favorite podcasts, pen testers had their favorite podcasts, malware reverse engineering was there's some communities around that, right? But with identity and the fact that you started so long ago, I'm curious about this. With identity, it's like identity people can sit in so many different roles and so many different teams and can be outsourced or insourced or co-sourced, right? When you started this, were the majority of the people IT people, consultants, when they were downloading and asking questions? Were there truly like that small segment of identity engineers that were super fascinated? Like, what was the initial kind of I'd say viewer, if you will, or listener?
Yeah, and I feel like digital identity has always had its core audience. I remember, Jeff and I kind of came from a very similar thread. We came out of industry before joining consulting. We're both IAM program managers. So it kind of like helped set our organization strategy, but also did implementation and, oversaw the managed services. So we kind of felt like we touched it all. And then we both worked for a company called Identity. Identity is no longer, but Identity was, had an advisory services arm, and the advisory services were vendor agnostic. So it kind of fits well with kind of the Identity at the Center podcast brand, which is we're not out there like we're not an Oracle identity management or Okta podcast, right? We'll talk about all of it. We'll talk about what the IAM practitioner is facing. And then in terms of how we grew, we started getting guests on the show. So people who are doing identity in the real world. Distinctly remember reaching out to Eve Mailer and just saying, hey, we've got this podcast. It was like, we were up to like 40 episodes or something. Would you like to be on our podcast? And she said, sure. And I remember sending a message to Jeff, like, we've made it, man. We've absolutely made it. Eve Mailer wants to be on our podcast. And Eve's awesome. She's been on the podcast 4 or 5 times. But it was like, being taken seriously by somebody who we looked up to.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry. Were you going to say something?
I think Jim hit it right on the head. I think the one thing, Samir, that I'm kind of happy you pointed out is not everybody who works in identity is technical. And I think there's a lot of backgrounds that are business focused. It does help to know, that kind of stuff, obviously, to be effective in your role. But there are plenty of non-technical roles in identity as well. Project management, business analysis, right? Things like that. And that's something that I've been happy that Identiverse in particular has started to add more business focused tracks to the content. I remember talking to Andy Hindle about that a couple of years ago. And so the idea of like, hey, not everyone is an authorization person and they just work on IDPs all day long, building SAML connections, right? That's just not how it works in the real world. There is so much more that goes to the program. So to your question about identity people, I think, yes, they've started in InfoSec probably because that's where it originally started. But I'm seeing a lot of people come from all over parts of different organizations now. Could be, just IT at large, like a help desk. It could be architecture. It could be infrastructure. I see non-IT folks coming in too as well. Traditionally, maybe like marketing or e-commerce type teams starting to have a role in this as well. So I think it's important to take all those viewpoints in, and I think that's been one of the things that at least that I've enjoyed is, hearing from these viewpoints and hearing these stories from the real world. So one of the things I do identity consulting today, just like Jim. We've been working together for like 9 years now. And we did identity in the real world. We're not just, hypothesis and book learning. Like we did identity in the real world and now we're doing consulting. We understand the pain that goes with it. And I think there is shared camaraderie and shared pain and misery. When it's like, hey, we did this project and boy, it sucked. Here's everything that went wrong. That's really terrible. How about you come on a show and tell your story so other people don't make that same mistake, right? Think about like that. So I'm happy to take all comers when it comes to the show and really hear from people out in the real world.
No, and I love the fact that you guys have kind of come from the program management side, because at the end of the day, that tends to be one of the harder roles where you have to take everyone's viewpoint, the compliance person, the privacy person, the operations person, the e-commerce person. And I know the technical people like to use, more acronyms like CIAM and SIAM. You can keep talking about all the acronyms, right? But there's actual real world experiences from, customer expectations to operational expectations to help desk expectations to IT and security expectations. And security is just really one big stakeholder in it, right? And we've talked a lot about this whole concept of a chief identity officer or chief identity. I think that's what we call it, right, David? CIO?
CIDO.
The idea.
CIDO.
Yeah. So I think I think what the reason I asked the question was I think that there's been a genesis where identity is starting to find more permanent homes, or at least from a leadership standpoint, maybe not from a resource standpoint. And I think that, the more and more, you guys, Jim and Jeff, you've probably seen this, right? There's so many startups now that are calling themselves really focused on identity and identity alone versus I do SSPM and I've got an identity play there. And I do, something else in cloud security or on-prem security. And I think it's only because of that very reason is that it's disjointed, dysfunctional sometimes, and painful to manage holistically when you have so many stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of IGA vendors coming up out of the woodwork, and there's some really good ones out there. And I wonder if we're heading to a phase here where it's a little bit disruptive, like where SailPoint was, 25 years ago when they were just coming into the market. It is interesting to see those things come out of the woodwork. Do they survive? Do they get acquired? I don't know. I mean, I think, you never really know until probably 5-10 years down the road, what the plan is. But there are certainly a lot of tools out there. And I think that's part of the challenge too about the identity space is there's a lot of tools out there. And there's a lot of good tools out there. Which is the right one? What are your requirements? What are you trying to do? I think a lot of that plays into it because the truth is you can probably be successful with any number of tools. It's really about finding the best fit for either your use cases or I like the way that UI looks better than that one because everything else is the same. Sometimes it'd be something as simple as, as dumb as that, but hey, those things win.
I think even dumber though is, we are a XYZ shop. So we're just going to go with XYZ. And I mean, when I got into the identity industry originally, it was around the 2004 timeframe. It was Netegrity, Oblix, and IBM. And so Netegrity got bought by CA, Oblix got bought by Oracle. So it was CA and Oracle and IBM. Now IBM is still around, but none of those products I think see the light of day anymore, right? It's all new products that IBM has. So I don't think the right move is to, pick your horse and try to jump on your horse and ride your horse, whether their product is good or bad.
Fair.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the word Oblix in forever. Thanks for the memories there, Jim.
Eyes glazed over like,
Man, it's time flies. Jeez.
But the thing with the Oblix tool though was that was the first identity tool that I worked with, and I found a consultant. His name was Stephen Lombardo. He worked for a company that no longer exists, but people would call him Boy Genius, and he was just like a good developer. And Oblix had all these things like you could build all these screens with DHTML, I think it was called at the time, and it was like we built a whole identity management system on top of Oblix. And I don't think most people were doing that because Oblix's pitch at the time was implement our product. You can save $75 for each help desk call. It's like, first off, nobody believes that. And second off, if like that's all you have to offer, not interested, right? You have to really be enabling some kind of business initiative. At least that's so my start was like more on the customer focused IAM side. And so to me, it was like, saving money on help desk calls was didn't even register as important, but that was, a large part of the value proposition at the time.
See, it's funny because it was for me. So I was at Walgreens and we started investigating self-service password resets as a way to stop the flood of calls that were coming in. I mean, we were running. So my background is like on IAM operations and then became like IAM program management. And so we had a team, of dozens of people who were doing literally nothing but identity and administration operations activities, creating accounts, Lotus Notes IDs, mainframe accounts, AS400, right? A whole bunch of stuff that I hope have died a horrible death.
No.
For them, at least. They're still out there. We still see them, right? It's, finance is using like mainframes of the, all over the place. But from an operations standpoint, we were dealing with tens of thousands of requests per month for access. And so we needed a way to really lower that because essentially we were acting as a call center for identity. Identity stuff took place in security, was not part of the normal IT help desk. And so we had to staff our own 24/7 operation. We had people working all kinds of hours. I remember having a pager duty, all kinds of stuff going on. And we needed a way to offset calls to us to reset passwords. If I never reset another safe boot password again, I will be extremely thrilled and excited for that pre-disk encryption stuff because I got to tell you, there's nothing more fun than be like 3 a.m. It's Sunday morning and someone's called in because the pharmacy's down and someone's like, oh, I'm trying to get in my laptop. And you're having to read like, basically like a Windows CD key in phonetic C as in Charlie, E as in Echo, right? And then they type it in wrong and then you have to do it again multiple times. That stuff I'm glad has gotten a lot better, but that was my real life. Like I was, doing that stuff all the time.
Yeah. What's a CD?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's an LDAP.
Yeah, we're bringing up all the old terms. DHTML, that was like what, Internet Explorer 97.
Yes, exactly. Internet Explorer 6. How long was that around?
Yeah, the get off my lawn of HTML.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did some ungodly things with Express and Sun Identity Manager back in the day, or WaveSet at the time. So
WaveSet, yeah.
yeah, I remember. So I got to tell the story. I remember it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'd been working on this thing like all day. Like it was we're getting ready to try to roll this thing out in production. Things weren't passing in test. And I had learned the tool so well that I was just better in Express. I was like, just let me see the Express and I can go figure it out. And I remember sitting there like fixing this bug, and I was like, if I ever meet the person that created this, I swear I'm gonna have words. Years later, I joined SellPoint, and who's there? Jeff Larson, chief architect. And he's like, yeah, that probably wasn't the greatest thing we should have done. I was like, Jeff, I cursed your name many of nights, sir. We're creating this monstrosity that was Express. But hey, you just go with what works.
It's got a voodoo doll somewhere that he was like, oh, I'm just going to put that away over here.
Dude, just many nights. Okay, so that's the origin story, and I think it's interesting too that you guys go from kind of working in the industry, to then like working for. I didn't know you guys were at Identity, which is so crazy that we didn't cross paths earlier, because I remember at Identity at the time. So Shaheen Badian went there from SellPoint because he was one of our implementation engineers. Fletch was there for a long time. There's somebody else that I'm missing. Wasn't Luis Almeida? Didn't he start at Identity?
Luis was there too. Yeah.
Yeah, Luis was there. Yeah. So like I knew all those guys when I was in Austin. So it's crazy that we never crossed paths. But such is life. It happens.
When you're saying Fletch, you're talking about Fletcher?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's a wild and crazy guy. He's with us now over at RSM.
Yeah, no, I know. We up on LinkedIn. He was like, "Oh, we should do something." I was like, "Yeah, definitely." I was like, "Yeah, kind of work for Guy Points that it might be competitive, but we'll figure something out." Okay, wait. So I got to tell this story.
Wait, competitors? All right, we got to shut this down. Hold on.
That's yeah. Like, okay, let me be nice. Actually, I don't have to be. This is mine. I own it. Whatever.
You do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's like whatever. But no, all right. So real quick, crazy Fletcher story in Vegas. It's PG, folks. Don't worry. You don't have to hide your kids. Not yet. So this was Identiverse. I think it was like 2 years ago, maybe 3. But I'm walking through, was it Caesars? And I run into Fletch, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up, man?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going to go meet this customer. Just come over, walk with me." All right. It's like midnight or something like this. It's Vegas. You never know what time it is, right? So it's after dark, right? Before morning. Somewhere in that time.
You have no idea. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Or it was not it. Who knows? Right. So he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go meet this customer. We're going to go to the craps table." I was like, "All right, cool. I've never really played, so I don't really know how to play." So it's like, "Fletch, all right, no problem. We'll teach you." So we go meet this customer. We go to the craps table. We sit there. Fletch is teaching me like the different areas, what to bet on, stuff like that or whatever. Having a good time. And I was like, "All right, cool." So I before we get there, I go out. I go to a little stop thing. I get like $200 in chips. I'm like, "All right, cool." I'm not a big gambler, right? So me and Fletcher going through, I'm betting like $5, $10 here, stuff like that or whatever. So then about 15 minutes into us being there, this group comes over and this guy gets to his roll and he proceeds to roll for the next 45 minutes. Like he is just hitting. And so like 15 minutes into his streak, like Fletch looks at me and go, "Okay, at this point, you're on your own. Like bet what you want to bet." He goes, "But this guy's hot and we're doubling down." And I'm just like, "All right." So we just start. This guy is just like nailing these points, right? And so it's him and like 4 or 5 of his buddies. And I can't remember the guy's name, but like after they're chanting this, we're all chanting his name, like every roll. His buddies are like stacks, like this high, doubling down, like because they're just rolling with it. Like he's on a hot streak going. I'm like, "Yeah, maybe I'll put 50. Like I'm just like, I don't know. So anyway, long story short, he rolls for like 45 minutes. Finally, craps out, right? His friends walk away. Then they go grab the chips or whatever. And we're just like, I'm looking at Fletch like, what the hell just happened? I put $100 down and walked away with like $1,200. Like, I was just like, all right. I was like, well, I'm only playing craps with Fletcher from now on.
See, for every story like that, there's a story of me where I was up $300 playing craps, gave it all back, and I was like, forget it. I'm done with this.
We're never doing this again.
Everybody wins around me, but I don't win.
That's the usual story, man. David's
I'm
an
the
exception.
Listen, it's not me. It's Fletcher. So all right. So this time we're gonna find Fletcher. We're gonna see.
He'll
if we
be at
can
the
make it
craps
happen.
table, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of Identiverse, let's talk about that. So how long have you? I've been. This is going to be like my 7th or 8th Identiverse now. I mean, it's been a long going conference. It used to be Cloud Identity Summit, right? And then it was with Ping, and now it's gone off on its own. So dun dun dun! Look at that, the official Brandon, baby. So yeah, last year you guys were there, did the podcast there. What are you guys most looking forward to this year at Identiverse?
Jimmy, you go for it.
Well, I will. I wore this shirt today. This was going to be one of my Identiverse shirts. So what I'm really looking forward to is how I dress for Identiverse. This is like my big thing for conferences. I always try to go out and buy a few crazy jackets and a few crazy shirts and things like that.
Okay.
Besides that, though, I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to the conference. I'm looking forward to the keynotes, and we're going to be podcasting a bunch. I mean, we don't have all the details lined up yet, but I think next week we're going to get a lot more in terms of details, at least talking to the folks from the conference. So, hopefully we'll be, I'd say, all right, Jeff, I'm not sure if you're going to be upset that I say this because it might not happen, but we're hoping to be able to be on the expo floor and do some podcasting there. I think at the very least we'll be off in a room podcasting and hopefully have some seating available for people to drop in and listen to the podcast as it's being recorded. We're starting to line up some guests. I know in talking with Ian, the winners of the Vittorio Bertucci and the Kim Cameron Award are going to be there. And these are folks who are kind of like up and comers in college who have taken an interest in identity and have applied and won this, I don't know if you'd call it a fellowship, but some kind of grant to be there at the conference to cover their expenses.
Nice.
So they can, take all this in. So we're going to get an opportunity to podcast with them and understand what their perspective is. And then, we haven't really filled out our schedule, but I'm hoping, David and Samir, that we can rope you guys in for a session as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I am a Identiverse virgin, so I will, pray the craps table and put money on other people, not on myself. But yeah, absolutely. And I think that I heard the name Ian Glazer, I heard Eve Mailer, and I've heard, obviously these are people that are well respected and known in identity. And I was just going to ask you guys, if you guys are the OGs, are they the cabal? And if not, who is the cabal? Is it Sachin Nair and Mark McLean?
They're the Identirati.
I was going to say the term is Identirati. Like
yeah, that's gorgeous. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I was at not to name drop or anything because I would never do that, but I was at dinner with Sarah Cicchetti and Ian and Vittorio and Dean and a few other people at a conference in Seattle a few years back, and I guess the word came out. It was like, what do we call it when a bunch of identity people get in the same spot? And it was called a disagreement of Identirati. Is what they called it.
Like a flock?
Yeah, exactly.
Or a murder of crows. It's a disagreement of Identirati. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Funny.
Yeah. I'm looking to the show. I mean, I've been going for years now. I feel like this is maybe 2015, 2016, I think was my first one. And I've been going every year since then. ID Pros kind of came out of this as well. So I've been part of that since that began. And I enjoy it. For me, it's, getting out, talking to people, meeting people, giving the obligatory fist bumps of thanks for people who have been on the show that we haven't been able to see in real life, right? Things like that, and just kind of meeting folks. And that's for me, that's pretty much it. I very rarely actually get to go to a session myself because we're usually tied up, doing other things, whatever it may be. But I'm actually hosting a session this year. Our friends Atul and Sean, who we had on the show just a while back, asked me to moderate a session around CAPE. Continuous authentication. I'm forgetting it. What is it? Continuous authentication and evaluation protocol. Right.
Yeah.
CAPE, CAEP. And so there will be a panel on that I'm hosting. So that's kind of the first time I've done that. And an Identiverse is getting on a stage and doing that. So that'll be kind of
Make sure you have the acronym down before you.
I got to figure out. You guys keep saying I am, and I don't even know what that means. Like, what is that?
What is this I am thing you're talking about?
Right.
I thought this was Alcoholics Anonymous. Where am I? Hold on a second. That's funny. But I'm going to RSA for sure, and I've done RSA for probably 10 years now, and I think again 10, 12 years ago, security was a much smaller, much fewer vendors, and I think it's gotten to that point now where it's kind of untenable, and so many people have reached out to us said we're not coming, right? I mean, David's not coming as an example, but it just there's it's just madness, right? At the end of the day, and it's really not about learning or doing business or anything like that. It's just about getting out of chores at home with your wife. That's what it seems like to me. Half of us are like, oh yeah, I just get to get away for a little bit, right? But I think with Identiverse and I have friends who go to the fraud forensics conferences, and now privacy conferences are getting quite popular. Not when I was started off in security, but now they are very popular. And I think it's got enough of a domain where you can have focused discussions. You can meet, like you said, practitioners and new vendors, new startups, have pitches, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I'm excited to do Identiverse this time. I just don't know about Vegas though. Somehow Vegas, like David mentioned, I don't know when the day starts. I don't know when it ends.
Doesn't matter. You don't need to. You can always eat. You can always people watch, and you can always find something to drink or play a game or just sleep. It doesn't matter. Time is just a construct, and there are no rules in Vegas. You don't have to go outside even if you don't want to.
I don't think it's good for people without a schedule, but go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd recommend for people who are going, especially if it's your first time, go to some of the sessions. Because you hear about people every year who go there and they just play cards for 3 days straight. And I don't think that's a good use of your company's time and money and investment, or your own, or however you're funding.
Gee, thanks, Dad.
There you go. But you do hear about it.
Yeah, go to the sessions. Go. You know what? Here's something that I like too: is go and take advantage of the vendor stuff that's going on. They're always trying to get people to show up for happy hour or a party bus, right? Or things like that. Go and take advantage of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's, part of being there is making relationships in the industry. And it doesn't have to be with just, practitioners. There's consultants, there's people that are product, people like us, right? They're all relationships that you definitely want to have in the industry.
Yeah. Go to the sessions. Go make friends, and then go play cards, because they're going to come with you. So you get the best of both worlds there. Come on.
You get all the above.
Get the vendors to pay for the card sessions.
Yeah, there's the pro tip. Wow. Yeah. So go find Samir. He's going to be paying for cards. I think that's what I heard there.
I'll have a lot of money in my pockets. It's not my money.
Yeah, I always think it's funny where people are like, oh yeah, I stay at the craps table and I just drink for free all night. It's like, you drink those $1 cocktails that they come around and give you. And in the meantime, you're betting $25, $50, $100 per roll. I don't know.
Yeah. If you want to eat and drink, there are better places to do it in Vegas. I mean, Vegas is world class when it comes to any of those things. Go see a show. I mean, there's, I'm not much of a drinker or a gambler, but I love going to Vegas still. And there's a lot of people who don't like it, but the town is built for conferences, and they have a ton of places to go and see.
It really is.
Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say I'm with you, Jeff. Like I'm not a gambler, but I love going to. I've seen, just about every one of the big shows. Like so all the Cirque du Soleils. I've seen like Michael Jackson's the one. Like I love the shows. I love like the different. There's so many restaurants, like really good restaurants and good food that's there. Yeah, it's just for like true entertainment. Like I love going there and just kind of enjoying the place and just kind of being around that energy. So it's always weird when people like hear me. It's like I love going to Vegas. They're like, but you don't like the gamble. I was like, no, I hate gambling. I was like, I do it now socially. Like I'll go, there's friends like, so obviously I told you I'll play craps with Fletcher's there. If not, I'm just like, all right, I'm going to go find a show or find a restaurant or something. So, but it is definitely built for conferences, right? I mean, it's just everything you need is there. I mean, the production crews there are just like world class, right? So your ability to get a lot of stuff done in one space is just maximizes. So I get it. As much as people kind of hate the hassle of kind of getting into Vegas, when you look at it from a business standpoint, it makes sense. There's not a lot of places in the US that can cater to that. I know a lot of people go down to Orlando, but I mean,
too
I think
hot,
that's
too humid, man. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean,
Talk about want to stay inside. See, there I'd be happy to stay inside all the time. Jim knows I'm not a Florida fan. It's just humidity is my kryptonite, and I'm not about that.
I got tickets for the Sphere. Speaking of having fun in Las Vegas. Now, have you guys done that before?
No, I have not done it yet.
No.
It is on the
It
list.
sounds like it's a total technological masterpiece. Like if you're sitting in a seat and someone next to you speaks a different language, the place has the ability that you could listen to what's being shown in English in one seat and Spanish in the next. Not with headphones. The directional speakers send you sound waves and they're for you.
Amazing.
I think that's pretty crazy.
I think we should do like a Identity at the Center, Identity Jedi Show in the Sphere,
There we
and
go.
get everybody involved that way.
But that'll pack the house.
Yeah, all three people will enjoy it. Very personalized experience.
They've had U2. They had Fish recently. They have all these different IMAX type movies, and then they have Identity at the Center and Identity Jedi.
Those are all warm-up bands, right?
Yeah,
Before-
right. Those are the warm-up specs.
Yeah.
Guys, we got this. We got this.
See, I'm trying to get RSM to pay to like put the Identity at the Center logo on the outside of the Sphere. Like Identity. See, I mean, it just come on, like RSM, if you're listening, come
It
on.
should be very reasonably.
It's only probably a
priced,
couple
too.
$1 million, right?
I mean, that's just, just a couple of, it's a year's worth of revenue. We're good. Got that.
We
One
could probably
big account.
afford one frame, and you would never see it because it would go by too quickly.
So with the industry, right? So all that you guys have seen, I've said for the last 2 years that this is kind of a special time in identity, because I think for the first time since, kind of brought it up earlier, Jeff, like back the Cell Point days, right, 25 years ago, when the market was just now kind of forming, and you saw a lot of people kind of take off to go best of breed. I think we're kind of in that same similar type of time now, where there's a lot of change. We're seeing a lot of new up and comers. Some of the bigger ones haven't innovated as frequently as probably would have liked to have. So what are you guys seeing? What trends are you guys seeing in identity right now? And what trend are you looking at and going, hey, I'm absolutely all about this, love this, I'm tracking this, I want to see more of this?
Well, identity is just a fad, so I don't think we have to worry about it. It's going to go away. We're going to have to worry about it. So just, do whatever. I think it's become plumbing at this point for a lot of folks. People don't really necessarily care how it gets done as long as it gets done, which leaves an opportunity for either, good tools to be in there or really crappy processes, a whole bunch of duct tape and bubble gum, things where you're using PowerShell scripts and MIM to run everything. And, you're just kind of happy with that. So I think there's a real danger point that we're at where, if you're really not being strategic with your identity tools, you can fall into this trap of, well, it just works. So pay no attention to the thing in the corner that's doing all the stuff. And you never really improve or evolve with the times. So I think that's something I'm kind of concerned about. And I know that there's other acronyms that have come up, ITDR, CAPE, CIEM, a whole bunch of different stuff. But me personally, I'm concerned with the status quo and people thinking that it's okay. We don't have to get better. We'll just leave it and let it run. We'll keep kicking that can down the curb and then be shocked when they get a large bill because they didn't do any innovation or keeping up with their program for the last 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, whatever that number is for them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think cloud infrastructure is just a ground shift. Is that the right term for identity? I mean, I think a lot of the tools that we've traditionally relied on for managing who has access to what in the enterprise behind the firewall don't cut the mustard for the cloud. And I think that's allowing for a lot of new technologies and companies to spin up. But I also think just from a CISO's perspective, they've caught on a little bit too late, right? So typically what I see a lot of is that application teams and infrastructure teams have gone out and procured, mostly app dev has gone out and procured cloud services, and their focus is on deploying services quickly and in an agile fashion. And then information security says, oh, we've got to get this under control. But how do they do that without becoming the no department or slowing things down. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. You can't leave the corporation exposed, and kind of traditional approaches that you understand don't work, but you're still responsible. The buck still stops at the CISO's office to protect information, to protect data. And so I think that's ultimately like the biggest challenge of our time right now.
Jim, you took a lot of what I was going to say. Actually, that's really good. I think we think very similar in this regard. I was going to say that I think identity was kind of a little bit of a hot potato when I was CISO, where we'd kind of point fingers at somebody else and say, well, it's broken in your process, not my process. And I just need this done, and kind of hand off requirements and walk away. What I'm still concerned about, I think it's getting better, by the way, in terms of what Jim said, which is the CISO is the single point, and the CISO role has been evolved, and now is being sued left, right, and center, and all that bad stuff. But with that, I think the thing that still concerns me is when I talk to CISOs now, there's a little bit of we bought SailPoint. No one ever got fired for buying SailPoint, almost like Oracle. I've got people working on it. I know it's a broken process, but I'll just throw more resources in India or some low-cost location at it. And, that kind of mindset of going to put my head in the sand for a little bit, right? And I'm not going to get fired for this, but I got to work on the latest and greatest breach that's out there. On the other side, where I think, we talked about the sheer number of vendors, good, bad, and ugly, is it's forcing people to reevaluate, right? It's forcing people to look inside and say, are we really doing this right? And if we do it the way we've always been doing it, will the teams that Jim talked about, the application teams, the infrastructure teams, the cloud and data sec teams, just go out and buy their own tools? And then suddenly you've got 7 tools again. And then someone's going to point back to that CISO. But here's the problem, guys. It's like the CISO tenure, 2.5 years. He's like, man, I'll make my money, just move on. I'll just survive. I'll make it through the desert storm, and I'll go on to the next gig. So not my problem. What is it? What do they say? Not my monkey, not my circus kind of thing. At some point, they walk away. It's unfortunate, but we have this revolving door of CISOs that will kind of do not the bare minimum, but will do enough to keep the board happy. And identity doesn't always get to that top 3 list, if you will, right? Sometimes it does, but not always.
Yeah, I think that, if you're in that CISO role and you took it over and things were already bad, and you've been trying to make the business case, spend the money to get them right, and you've met so much resistance, and the industry's getting harder, now you find yourself 2 years down the road, you own that thing, good, bad, or ugly. You own it because you've had it for 2 years, and now you're super underinvested. You're just a breach away from being fired anyway.
Yeah, agreed.
So,
and as CISOs that have moved around jobs, I can tell you this, that initially, 5-7 years ago, we'd look at each other and say, man, you had that job. What the heck were you doing there, Samir? You idiot. You just you barely did anything. And I'm like, guys, do you realize the resistance I faced trying to get the budget to do this, to get the buy-in? And then now we are kind of band of brothers and sisters who are like, yeah, how do we get past that board member, or how do we, get a CTO to kind of buy into the fact that this is going to affect customer satisfaction potentially, right, etc. So
I think it's an overlooked part where people just don't think about the politics that go into identity and security. Yeah. It's Game of Thrones sometimes. I hate to say it, but sometimes it's a good Game of Thrones story, and sometimes it's really bloody, and things don't happen the way you thought it would. But if you're not playing politics, or at least aware of the politics of any organization, you're going to really struggle. Yeah, I hate to say it, but every organization has it.
Yep, small or big, you're right.
And the ones that go, no, we don't have it, are the worst ones. It's like, oh no, yeah, you do, yeah, you do.
Yep.
So wouldn't it be interesting if we were all making the case like, oh, every couple of years these new forms of attack make our job so much harder? But that's not what's happening. We have all this money to build tools, and the primary forms of attack are like social engineering and phishing. They've been around since we got into IT.
And maybe even before IT to some extent, right?
Yeah, these are people problems at the end of the day, right? And it's I think one of the things that hurts identity the most and it's part of the greater security problem is we still don't know how to talk to the business value of why this thing makes sense. So, right, Jim, you talked about Obelix, right? Like, why did they go to the $75? Because they had to tie themselves to some kind of quantitative data to show, like, okay, what are these board members, these executives really going to care? I gotta find something that's quantitative that they can track, that they can see, because I can't just tell them, oh, because it's the right thing to do or it's going to make it better, right? And we still, security as a whole, I think, still struggles with that. I think it's a little bit better. You kind of get it, right? But identity specifically, because there's so much that it touches, because there's so many things that it can do, it's really hard to find a specific thing in a business and say, this is why we need to do this in order to increase this and make this better. We're still kind of young in being able to tell those stories, like, to those executives, and understand, like, this is how this is going to make it better, and why you need to kind of be focusing around this and use that. And until, honestly, we figure that out, I think it's always going to be the struggle, right? So I'm interested for you guys, right, from an advisory perspective, right? When you get those customers who, clearly just don't care, right? You point at you, like, here you go. Like, here's everything you need to do. Like, here's where you are. Like, hey, standards is here and you're way down here. And they just go, all right.
Or they just don't believe you, because the last E&Y consultant, sorry, I'm picking on E&Y, but last Big Four consultant came in and gave them a maturity score of, like, you're pretty good and you just got to spend a little bit more and you're going to be best in class in my spider graph. Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I think this is, if you're in consulting, you can always find something. If you're looking for problems, you're going to find them. Nobody's perfect. Let's just get that out there right now, right? But is your program effective, and does it meet the needs of the business, is a totally different answer. It might be. You don't need every bell and whistle in the book. Right. If it's removing access in a timely manner, if it's provisioning access in a timely manner, and if you can prove everything that you said you did in the middle happened, right? That's compliance, that's governance. Things like single sign-on, MFA, those have come along. Privileged access management is kind of starting to have a little bit of a moment here because cloud is bringing it back up again, right? Things like that. So I think this is where it's invaluable for an organization to have a really good IAM program manager, someone who is strategic, understands where they're trying to go with the program for the company or organization, whatever it may be. They don't have to be the most technical person in the room, but they have to be a really good diplomat. They have to be a very good communicator, get out there and shake hands, kiss babies, make friends, understand the dynamics of the organization, and really understand, how do I sell this thing to the business? Because if you just go in and say, well, this is for security, cool, see you next year, right? Or we'll see you when the next breach happens, and then we'll throw some money at it. So I think there's a real dynamic that really needs to be put in place. And this is part of the thing that I find fascinating personally is the psychology that goes into building an IAM program. Who are your allies? Who do you need to convince? Where are the areas that are used to doing it a certain way and they're resistant to change? How do you get those folks, on your side and kind of see the light, so to speak? So I think that's, again, that IAM program manager role is so huge, I think. And a lot of corporations and businesses that I work with don't have that. And so they rely on outside parties, or they kind of limp along, and maybe they groom someone. But I think it's one of the most important roles you can have, especially the larger the organization. I think the more you need that type of role. I don't know if it rises to the level of CIDO, Chief Identity Officer. I think that's probably more organizational specific. But I'm in favor of enough juice in the role to be able to either direct change or influence the change very heavily by proxy authority or whatever that may be.
I don't want to see a Cheeto, and here's why. Because I don't want to see them become the next sacrificial lamb like we did with CISOs. So because I actually want that role to work. Like, it'd be really cool. Like, that's one that would actually maybe convince me, like, to actually come back to industry and be like, okay, I'll take that role. Like, that should be fun. But, like, I know too many CISOs, and I'm just like, yeah, nope, not signing up for that.
But I think we can learn lessons from that, though. Like, we saw what happened with CISOs. If I was, approached to say, hey, we want you to become the new Cheeto. Well, first of all, excellent title, right? I'll take that. But sure, but here's what I require in return. Sufficient budget, sufficient resources. Yeah, exactly. The resources to actually be effective in this. And if I give you advice or strategy or whatever that we need to put in place, and you, the business, and we'll just pick on the CEO for now, and the CEO says no, I'm going to document that in writing. And if there's an issue that comes up where that would have been, part of it, guess who's on the hook? Not me. I told you what we needed to do, and you ignored the advice of it. And I feel like, Jim, you kind of bring this up sometimes when we're talking with clients together is, I want to steal your thunder, but the whole idea of letting people know, well, now you can't ignore it. I know you say it more eloquently than I do, so I'll let you have at it. But I think that awareness is important.
No, I think with the CIDO role, for me, CIDO is not responsible for who has access to what in your internal systems. To me, the CIDO is driving some kind of identity initiative where identity is core to your business. So take what MasterCard is doing with decentralized identity. I mean, that's fundamental to how they're going to conduct their business in the future, is kind of as an identity provider using that technology. To me, that warrants the level of CIDO. I think if you're talking about who has access to what, that's squarely within the realm of information security, chief information security officer. That person is, the end result of, or it has to, the buck stops at their desk for securing the enterprise. Now, when it comes to how you go to market with, customer IAM, e-commerce, things like that, I think there could be a middle ground, but definitely I think the internal identity, not so much. Now, I think back to the original topic that you brought up, David, around, the sorry, you might have to clip this part out, but I remember what your original question was. Customers who kind of just sort of like, yeah, you put together a strategy, you met with all my stakeholders, and then ultimately you said, great, we have a strategy and we're not going to do it. So my question to those folks, and look, I've been doing identity advisory for 12 years now. I started doing it in January 2012. And I was not very good at it at first, right? Because I come out of the industry and I seen how identity worked in 2 or 3 places. But I've had lots of scenarios where the strategy never gets implemented, right? You went and you built the strategy. And my question for those folks is, do you disagree with the strategy, or can you just not sell the strategy internally? And so if you disagree with the strategy, let's resolve that right now. Let's get it out on the table. We'll adjust the strategy. We should have never gotten to that point at the end, right? We should have been doing iterative processes along the way to make sure you agree with the assessment. Then you agree with the recommendations. Well, you should agree with them with the roadmap if you have the input in terms of here's how much we can take at a time. Now, if you're having problems selling it up the chain, why is that? Is it because your leadership's not educated on the value proposition that you get from identity, or is it you just don't know how to engage with those folks? Either way, I want to help you either educate or and we have to put together like an executive presentation that helps them to understand. And there is a balance between creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD factor, versus saying like, hey, guess what? Breaches are real. And companies like yours end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal when they get breached. And then your name becomes a cocktail party joke, punchline, because you get breached and you gave up 72 billion identity records or something like that. So, helping them educate, or, hopefully the folks, I mean, this is one of the real skills. If you're going to be an identity program manager, if you haven't built those skills already, you really need to build those skills, which is to help sell your ideas to the business. And I think that, if you're listening and you're kind of in that position, you're like not real confident about it, start finding people to mentor you within your business, people who have done it successfully, who look at you as somebody who, you could get there, and start taking advice from them. Start seeing who's willing to listen to you, bounce your ideas off, and then help get that guidance from them. But I don't think it's the consultant's fault if you're asking those questions.
Yeah. Or, shameless plug, you can attend my session at Identiverse where I will cover. No, I'm just kidding. But no, seriously, I am doing a masterclass at Identiverse covering like how to ask questions, identity first architecture, and business value, like selling business value to the business, and it's more about like the skills you need to learn and have and master in order to do these things. Because it's going to be different in every single organization. But I personally think that we don't put enough onus on the soft skills. And I think everybody in identity, from program manager down to practitioner, needs to have these skills. Like you need to focus on relationship building. You need to focus on communication and understanding what's important to the business, right? Talk to the business and understand what they are. Talk to them, don't talk at them, right? I think where we still have challenges, right? And this is still the whole tech business thing in general, but with identity is we love to get down and we're talking about OAuth and we're talking about CAP and SCIM and all these things, and we need all these tools, all this stuff or whatever. Great, cool. But you do this to put a business, to put an access review in front of a business manager, and they're like, I don't know what the fuck this is.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to hit approve all.
Yep, right. And then we're mad because they hit approval. It's like, well,
yeah,
you gave them just a blanket of data and said do something with it. And they said, okay, here's the big green button. Works for me. Done. Right? Why? Because do you understand their day-to-day and what they have to do and how identity functions in their day-to-day? Because they're not going to tell you that because they don't know. They don't think about it. To them, it's like it's just something I got to go do. And so it's part of that of that understanding. And it's a lot what I talk to my customers about. It's like, it's funny, now that I do a lot more of the advisory stuff, I rarely talk about technology. I'm literally like a freaking therapist now. I'm literally talking to them. I'm asking them questions. I'm trying to figure out what's in their way. Why is this in your way? Okay, let's come up with things we can put in place to help remove these obstacles. Who are you communicating with? Because it's like, these are all the things that actually are going to matter to give you a successful identity program. Because if you don't get these things down, I don't care. Pick we could throw a dartboard at a vendor. Great, here you go. And I can tell you exactly where you're going to fail if you haven't done these things, right? Oh, you still don't talk to the business and app dev runs off and does whatever they want to? Okay, no problem. Here, buy this tool. And in 3 months, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get 10% of the applications onboarded. App dev's going to kick back and go, there's no way we're freaking doing that. We're not changing anything. You'll get stalled and be like, we only have 3 applications and we can't get past it. Oh, because you didn't think to actually talk to the business beforehand and understand and talk to them about application onboarding, make a plan for application onboarding, sell to them the reason why this is going to be important, what they're going to do, put together some standards and procedures that you may have to get top down. All those things that you glazed over when we talked about, you said you didn't want to do because you thought this new whiz-bang tool was going to fix it. It's not, because it doesn't fix people. Okay, my rant's over.
Well, I thought of, as you were saying that, a product is not a strategy. And a lot of companies were like, let's skip the strategy part. Let's just go buy a product that says they can do all these things, and then we'll be okay. And that's where I see a lot of people quitting, because they realize 6 months in, oh no, this actually isn't going to work. I better go find another job before I get fired.
Well, I think that's, you bring up a good point there too, Jim. I think some of this, needs to go on to the product vendor themselves as well. You're trying to buy my product to do what? Hey, all we care about is sales. Just sell it and we'll figure out how to do it later, right? I don't know how many times we've talked with, we all probably talk with customers where you have the leading product in the space. It doesn't matter what the space is, the leading product. But they did a terrible job of rolling it out. They did a terrible job of setting up the people and the process around the technology that they hate it. Is that the technology's problem? No, it's organizational. Did the technology vendor push back and say, you want to do what with what? That's not really our sweet spot. Vendors aren't trained to do that, right? They want to get the sale. They want to get the, get the revenue from that, which I get, right? It's a business. We all have to, kind of take care of that side of it.
Yeah.
But I would be very, very wary if someone's like, oh, well, we're going to go and get an IGA tool, and it's also going to be our ITSM platform for the entire organization.
Asset management. Yeah,
what?
Exactly.
That doesn't make any sense. But could you do it? Yeah. Should you? Hell no.
Yeah, it's like we need a new shared responsibility model, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, vendors, your job is to build a product. They want to build a product. They want to sell the product, and that's what they want to do. They want to get really, really good at manufacturing this product, and that's their main point, right? B2B has always been this weird thing where we have this expectation of a vendor to be more than what they are. When I go, so I'm in my office right now, right? So PlayStation, I go buy a PlayStation. I don't expect Sony to come in and help me learn how to play Apex Legends or Madden. Like, no, their job is done. I sold you the console. You buy the game. Like, what are you calling me for? Does the controller not work? Is there something? Then I can't help you, right? But it's only in B2B where we expect like the vendor to be like, oh, and by the way, can you help me with all this mess? And the vendor's like, I mean, how much are you gonna pay? Sure, we'll figure it out, right? So yes, I think there does need to be. I do hold vendors to having sat in that seat before and been on that side, right? I do want vendors to kind of hold the line a little bit and be like, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, hey, this is not the way for our tool, right? What we're selling you does these things. If you're going to go this route, yeah, you could, but it's probably not the best fit, right? I will admit I've been pleasantly surprised the last couple of years. I see more and more vendors doing that because they also understand truly like you're not worth the cost. You're not worth the money that I'm going to get in. I'm going to burn through all of this revenue that I would make with this sale because you're constantly going to be doing things and asking of my team that I'm never going to deliver. When you're a startup, look, you grab what you can grab, right? Samir can speak to that point. Like you take what you can take.
Figure it out later.
but you quickly start to mature and figure out, right? And learn, what customers are good customers, right? In the beginning, you got to kind of take them all, but then you want to quickly get out of that and go, okay, these are our good customers, right? It gets the most value to us. They're happy with the product, and this makes sense. These are bad customers where they're constantly unhappy because they're trying to do things in our product and push us to go areas where we never really wanted to go, and this tool doesn't really do, right? But they keep writing bigger and bigger checks, and so we keep doing it. Like, so we do need to. I think that area needs to kind of change, and there needs to be, I'm big about accountability on both sides, and so when I advise customers, I'm like, there's an accountability on your side. I was like, don't walk into a POC with the vendor and not have your use cases down of what you want to see. They come in and show you, they're going to show you whatever they want to show you in their nice, created environment that's all controlled. And I was like, that's what they do, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's how they can show their tool. But you want to walk in there and understand what is it that you want to see, which means to you, and see how well they can adapt and show you that. And if it just so happens that the things you want to see line up with what they have, there you go. That's a good fit. But you're never going to know that unless you've done your work and know what you're going to go get, right? I think there's a little, there's a little too much trust on each side, right? Where customers like, okay, like the vendor, just tell me what it is. And it's just like, okay, cool. Well, the vendor's also going to tell you what's in their best interest, which is for you to buy their product.
You said the word trust there, and I was just thinking about that. How many of your vendors, partners, whatever you want to call them, do you actually trust? And which are just transactional in nature?
Yep.
If you're in that space and you're in sales, for example, you're going to move around either within your own organization or other organizations. And if people don't trust you, they're going to have a really hard time buying from you.
Yeah, and just because we're going to go out and hire a bunch of field CISOs, field CTOs, and just overlay them as thought leaders to support sales doesn't mean it's actually a bad thing. I think we're actually, corrupting, people and giving them wrong incentives to make a sale versus actually be thought leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There we go. We just attacked all the field CISOs.
We're done. We fixed it. We fixed all of Identity's problems.
We fixed all of it. See, this is what happens when you get four great minds together. Okay, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up because we will talk for hours. I could do this for hours, but, want to be respectful of everybody's time. Jeff and Jim, thanks so much. This has been a long time coming. It's so awesome to see. So party bus at Identiverse with both of you in Vegas. That's what we're saying right now. It's happening. It's happening.
Jim will be in the fancy coat, and I will look like a normal person.
We're gonna make sure we have it. But before we go, like any parting words that you guys want to, say to the viewers, say to the watchers.
Come listen to David's episode he did on our podcast, idacpodcast.com, episode number 224. So it wasn't even that long ago. It was like maybe, July 31st of last year. So we're probably due for a refresher at some point here. But you've been on our show, now we're on yours.
If we can get David and Samir, that would be great.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to end up, because I did have one thing to say on the last topic.
Yeah.
Which is, I think what happens a lot is software vendors, especially in our identity space, they say, we just want to work with partners. But they get so addicted to that services revenue that it's like, yeah, we want to give the services to our vendors or have our customers install themselves, but are they ready to walk away from $1 million or $2 million from the top line? Probably not, especially when they're getting like $300 an hour, $400 an hour. It's really hard for them to step away from that. But I will say, this is my experience, is that it's rare the company that does its own services will tell you that their product can't do something. Their product can do everything, and it can do it really well.
The answer in every RFP is yes.
And then when you go to do it, you find out like someone's like, well, who told you could do that? So I think that's the advantage of working with independent consulting.
Yes,
I know
agreed.
I'm talking my own book here a little bit, and I've been doing like the independent consulting route since 2012. But that I do think there's a real advantage to it.
Here's the challenge that I would put to every single vendor that's out there, right? I'll keep it to the identity space, right? If you're an emerging vendor or you're a new vendor, you're thinking about getting into the space. Here's what I would challenge you to do. Your aim should be your secondary aim. First aim, solve a problem for the customer. Second one, put services companies out of business. The fact that when you get outside of B2B and look at like a B2C app, right? We're making apps now that are so simple to use. Like, why do you need services? And I don't like the fact that a lot of people just think, oh, this will always need services. It's like, why would it always need services? If you create a product simple enough, right, and you solve some of these harder problems and make it easier, you won't need services to go in and do that. Because, and what you'll find is like what most people think is services, what we talked about before, is no, the customer doesn't have a strategy. They don't know what they're doing. That product's never going to fix that. But they can get away with like, okay, we'll just give you something and like that's generic enough that you can kind of go figure and make whatever you want. So that would be my challenge. And are they hard problems to solve? Absolutely. Some of them are absolutely hard. But I just look at where we are now and the things you can do with technology. And it's like, we've got entire no-code platforms that people are building scalable applications without a single speck of touching code ever. You've got non-technical people building really scalable applications. So you can't tell me that we can't make these products that much easier to where you don't need as much services. So that would be my challenge.
I think you're right. Philosophically, I think in 90% of the cases out there, the technology still can't get very far without services. Now, I have talked to some vendors, even in the IGA space, where they're spinning a product and focused on, hey, customers, you got to be a kind of a technical customer, but customers are deploying our technology without consulting. But here's what I've seen in my 20 years in the industry is that a vendor is going to grow so large, and then how do they grow from there? It's they have to get into customers' CIOs and CISOs offices, and they don't have the contacts. Their salespeople can't get in. And then they start tapping into partners who can get them in the door. Now, for partners to do that, there's got to be something in it for them. They're not going to burn their contacts for some company that's not giving them a return. So that is the conundrum, right? Not stated very often, but I'm throwing it out there on the internet so everybody kind of knows. Like companies all hit that point in their growth strategy, or else they go out of business. But
yeah.
I
gotta say about that.
Yeah,
is that closing on a light note or what?
Yeah, that's deep.
We're gonna get banned. That's awesome. All right, but no, you're right.
You're right.
That is a bigger problem to kind of what I said, like the marketplace of how we sell and do a lot of that, right? So look, it's one of the most lucrative places to be is the middleman. That's always been the case in capitalism, right? Like if you find something you can do and be in the middle to broker things where you don't have to be where the ultimate goal is like you don't have to be responsible for either side of it. You just get to collect the fee to be in the middle. And for the most part, that's what some of these, the VARs, that's what they are. They have the contacts, they have the reach. You want to get in, but then, either it's margin on top of your resale, or I need to be able to have some services, to kind of get in there. And so there we go. So innovators disrupt that problem, fix that problem. Of course, we'll all be out of a job, but yeah, whatever. We'll find some other stuff.
We'll just do podcasting full time then.
I'll be happy. All right. This has been awesome, guys. Appreciate you so much. You guys can check this out. Obviously, you guys know these guys, the Identity at the Center podcast. You can check it out on all streaming platforms. Obviously, the Identity Jedi Show is also on all streaming platforms. Make sure to subscribe to the IdentityJedi.com where you can get to the newsletter. It comes out every 2 weeks. And in fact, I'm actually getting ready to send out a nice little email now. By the time you guys see this, you have already gotten it about some new things that are coming. Make sure to like, rate, subscribe wherever you follow this. And you guys know what it is. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Love each other. See you guys next time.
Thanks, Al.
Bye.